As you would expect with a horror game, the player is usually surrounded with death around every corner of these intense video games. Yet sometimes death is a lot closer to one of the main characters than you might realize at first. See, one of the most popular and famous twists seen in horror games is the classic "they were dead all along." Like with horror movies, this trope is used in various ways with the main characters of some of our favorite horror games out there. So, on this episode of Nerdspace Games, we'll be diving into that exact topic as I give you guys 7 main characters that you didn't know were dead all along. Now this should be obvious, but clearly today's list will feature spoilers, so here's your spoiler warning. But before we get started, if you haven't already, please consider subscribing to the channel for more survival horror content. Also, hit that like button if you enjoyed today's topic. Anyway, my name is Ruben with Nerdspace Games, and this is 7 main characters in horror games that were dead all along. Let's get it. Number 7, Kim Seong-A, White Day, a Labyrinth Named School. One of the most underrated horror games out there is White Day. This game is phenomenal and quite terrifying thanks to all of the unique ghosts you encountered within this horrifying school. During the game, you come across 3 women as well, one of which is Kim Seong-A. Throughout the game, you begin to build a relationship with Kim and the other women that you meet in the game, only to then learn that one of them, Kim, is actually responsible for everything happening at this school right now. See, years prior to the events of the main story, Kim Seong-A actually died in a fire. After becoming a ghost in this cursed school, she fed off of the negative energy that built up over time thanks to the school's curse. This ultimately led to the Master of the Labyrinth essentially taking control of her spirit and using it to cause more suffering on the poor unfortunate souls that died in this school. Up until the final sections of the game that leads to the true ending, Kim appears to be like any other normal high school girl. She even flirts with the player and builds a relationship with him over time to the point where you might even find yourself connecting with her more than the rest of the other characters. So imagine how shocking it is for the player to finally learn that one of the characters that they've been connecting with all of this time is in fact dead, and even worse is the main villain of the game. Number 6, almost the entire cast, Little Hope. As with most entries of the Dark Picture Anthology series, Little Hope is a narrative-driven horror game that prioritizes story over gameplay. Yeah, unlike the other entries of today's list, we won't be looking at a single character. Instead, we'll be looking at 4 out of the 5 main characters thanks to the twist revealed at the end of the game. See, at the start of Little Hope, we see a family of 5 appear to die one by one while escaping a fire. Interesting enough, we see new characters with new names that resemble each of the characters that died in said fire. Throughout the story, we slowly start to put things together before we finally understand the whole picture. As it turns out, not all of the characters died. One of them, Anthony, survived the fire, and he is actually Andrew, one of the 5 characters that we control in Little Hope. However, it gets more interesting. After crashing his bus, as Anthony is now a bus driver, he begins to hallucinate his deceased family. Yep, that means the other 4 main characters of the game are all a figment of Andrew, aka Anthony's, imagination. In fact, the game does a decent job at going back and showing some of the weird interactions Andrew has with other side characters and why they all acted the way they did. It's because he was talking to himself and acting as though he was multiple people. Number 5, Fang Ray Shin, Detention. Fang Ray Shin is one of 2 main characters of the indie horror game Detention. Straight up, this game is one of the best narratives that I have ever seen in a small indie horror game. If you haven't played it and you're a fan of psychological horror games with interesting and deep stories, I highly recommend that you check this one out. Anyway, Ray finds herself inside of a dark alternate reality of her school, Greenwood High School. In this school, Ray encounters the Lingered, man-eating ghost spirits that roam around looking for souls to devour. While investigating the school, Ray ultimately begins to face her past and deal with some of the most traumatic events within her life. After a while, Ray meets the school counselor, Mr. Chang, who begins spending time with Ray to help her get through a tough time and improve her grades at school. During this time, Ray falls for Mr. Chang. Then, after misunderstanding a conversation that she overheard between Mr. Chang and one of the teachers at the school, Ray becomes jealous and sets out to frame the teacher and get her fired. Unfortunately, Ray doesn't completely understand the consequences of her actions until it's too late. The teacher is arrested, most of her classmates are either killed or arrested as well, and the man that she fell in love with, Mr. Chang, is executed by the government thanks to her actions. Because of this, Ray Shin commits suicide, which ultimately led to her being stuck in purgatory, which is essentially the world that we find ourselves in throughout the majority of the game. Number 4, Brown, Rural Rose. Not every main character on this list is a human being. Take Brown the dog for example. Brown is the dog companion of the main protagonist of Rural Rose, Jennifer. Throughout the game, Brown joins Jennifer for a majority of the game by helping her fight off monsters and locate hidden items. Yet, from the moment Brown is introduced at the start of the game, we start to see small hints that point towards the fact that Brown might already be dead. That's confirmed during a flashback sequence in which we see Brown kidnapped by the Red Crown Aristocrats Club. After arriving at the club's throne room, we learn that the club, under Wendy's command, beat Brown to death. In fact, with the exception of Jennifer, every character in this game is actually already dead. See, the story of Royal Rose is one that follows a young woman who is facing her traumatic past in the form of creatures and monsters that symbolizes dark moments she had experienced within the Rose Garden orphanage. The flashback sequence reveals that after the club killed Brown, Wendy manipulated a grieving father into attacking the orphanage, which ultimately led to him killing everybody except for Jennifer. So the characters that we have interacted with throughout the game are nothing but a figment of Jennifer's imagination and a way for her to confront and cope with her traumatic past. It was such an awful feeling when we saw what became Jennifer's best friend, but because of how much joy and comfort he brought the player through an otherwise dark and gloomy game, Brown will remain one of the best good boy dogs in video games. Number 3, Nicole Brennan, Dead Space. From the moment that Isaac and his team arrive on the Ishimura, they immediately begin to see things that are not actually there. That's because the alien artifact known as the Red Marker causes hallucinations that are used to help aid it in its ultimate goal, increasing the number of necromorphs attached to its hive mind while also protecting the Red Marker from harm. We hear about an example of this early on in the form of Isaac's teammate Kendra Daniels seeing her deceased brother move around the ship. So with this concept pretty much established early on, it's fair to assume that anything and anyone encountered on this ship could be nothing more than a hallucination brought on by the Red Marker. Which is exactly the case when we learn that one of the other main characters of the game, Isaac's girlfriend, Nicole Brennan, is nothing more than a hallucination. See, before the start of the game, Nicole recorded a video message for Isaac and sent it over to him in which she committed suicide so that she wouldn't have to see the necromorphs kill her or influence her to do something that she didn't want to do. However, thanks to the Red Marker's influence, Isaac's memory of that video message was blocked out. Then when he arrives at the ship, Nicole begins talking to Isaac and slowly manipulating him over his time on the ship. Near the end of the game, it's revealed that Nicole is not actually Nicole, but a scientist on the Ishimura who's also being manipulated and tricked by the Red Marker. Number 2, Ethan Winters, Resident Evil Village. While the Resident Evil franchise has its fair share of main characters dying, Ethan Winters may very well be the saddest death of the entire franchise. However, in Resident Evil Village, we see probably one of the biggest and most surprising twists in the series. Before Ethan sacrifices himself to save Rosemary and defeat Mother Miranda and her Megamycete, we learn a secret that only Mia Winters knew. The Ethan Winters that we spent time with over the past 2 games is in fact nothing more than a molded version of him. See, in RE7, when Ethan was attacked by Jack Baker for the first time, Jack actually killed Ethan. From there, Evelyn brought him back to life to be her father using the mold. Which, when you think about everything that Ethan survived, it's not too surprising to find out that he's not actually human. Prior to the reveal of him being already dead in a BOW, we see Ethan have his foot cut off, his hand cut off twice, and eventually his fucking heart ripped out by Mother Miranda. Even though Resident Evil isn't exactly known for its twist endings and shocking revelations, RE Village completely caught us off guard with probably one of the most intense, they were dead all along moments seen in a horror game. Well, there's one other entry that probably shocked us more than Ethan's reveal. Let's get to that right now. Number 1, Harry Mason, Silent Hill, Shattered Memories. If you're a fan of the Silent Hill franchise, but you have never played Shattered Memories, then you might be shocked to hear about Harry Mason, the main protagonist of the original Silent Hill, be someone that qualifies for today's list. Silent Hill Shattered Memories is a reimagining of the first Silent Hill game. Reimagining being the key word here, as it's definitely far from a traditional remake in the way that it completely changes everything that you knew about the original game. This includes the main story of the game. See, Silent Hill Shattered Memories still follows Harry Mason throughout a majority of the game as he searches for his missing daughter. However, throughout the game, you also see a faceless character interacting with a psychiatrist named Dr. Michael Kaufman. Yeah, that Dr. Kaufman. Anyway, the end of the game reveals that Harry Mason is actually dead. See, as it turns out, 18 years prior to the sequences that we see with Dr. Kaufman, Harry Mason died in a car wreck. His daughter, Cheryl Mason, is actually the person that is meeting with Dr. Kaufman in an effort to deal with her trauma regarding her father's death. The main events that we have seen throughout the story of Shattered Memories is in fact a fantasy that Cheryl has dreamt up in order to help her cope with the death of her father. It's a tragic twist that ultimately shocks fans of the franchise who are familiar with both Cheryl and Harry Mason from the mainline entries. While the twist of Shattered Memories definitely rubbed fans of the original games the wrong way, it was definitely a great standalone story that connected with each and every one of us that experienced this psychological horror hidden gem. But that does it for this episode of Nerd Space Games. Hit up the comments and let me know what you think of my list. What They Were Dead All Along moment did you find the most satisfying and shocking in a horror game? Did it make my list? Anyway, if you haven't already, be sure to subscribe to my channel for more survival horror content. Also, leave a like in today's video if you enjoyed today's topic. But thanks for watching, and as always, I'll catch you guys on the next episode of Nerd Space Games. Take care.